Hi everyone, Savannah here, and today we're sketching this cozy witchy scene with a glowing cauldron, stacked books, and a little frog perched on top. I'm using my free Procreate brush set, which you can find in the link down below, as well as a link to the color palette and the outline that I used in this video. Let's go ahead and jump right in. The first thing we're doing is changing that background, so go to layers, select background color, and in the Bubbling Cauldron color palette, we're going to select that dark yellow-orange color. Then we're going to create two new layers. The first layer that we are going to create, you're going to drag down below the outline layer, and then you can create the other one. It'll be right above that first one we created. And we're going to grab this dark green color. We're going to grab that circle blend brush, and we're going to add some more color variation to the background here. Now with my blend brushes, they are very blendable, they are pressure sensitive, and so the harder you press, more of that pigment that you have selected will be visible. The lighter you press, the more it will blend in. Now, if you're going from two very contrasting colors, so for here, they are pretty contrasting. We have a bright color and then a little bit of a darker color. You can grab those in between colors. When you press lightly on that brush, there's going to be a little bit of that in between color of the ones that we have on the screen. And so you just hold your finger down on that color you want. The color will be picked up and then you can use that to blend it out even further. So I'm just going to blend this out. You could do a Gaussian blur on this if you wanted to. I just like the texture of blending it out with the brush, but there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just depending on what your personal style is. So if you want to just do a Gaussian blur, you can do that. Or if you want to do this technique, you can do it the way that I'm doing it here. But again, I'm using that blend brush, that circle blend brush, so that I can kind of blend this out a little bit better. And now I'm going to grab an even lighter color, so this lighter blue color, and I'm going to put that towards the middle where the bubbles are going to be coming out, or the smoky bubbles are going to be coming out. So I'm adding it to the bottom here to kind of highlight these objects that are down below, and then I will blend this out as well. And you'll notice that I didn't fully fill in where that kind of bubble cloud smoke's going to go because it's going to be covered anyway, so I'm not going to bother doing that section. And now let's go ahead and add the bubbly smoke that we have here. So on that second layer that we created, let's grab that magenta color. It's a dark magenta color. We're still using the circle blend brush, and we're going to add in a lot of the color here, the purple. So you'll see in the bottom left image, I went purple on the right and more of this limey green on the left. So I'm going to start with the purple, blend this in a little bit. We'll grab the green, and then I'm going to blend those two colors with those in between colors, like I mentioned how to pull that color up. So I'm going to grab that in between color and blend it out even further. So that's what I'm going to do here, is just add those two colors, this purple color, and then in that color palette right next to it is a lime green that I'm going to use on the left side. And now it's just a lot of blending these two colors, blending it also out with the background. And so we're just going to keep doing that, grabbing those in between colors, grabbing more of that limey green, more of that purple, and just keep blending it out until it's looking how you want it to look for this kind of bubbly cloud that we have going above the cauldron. Now I do have this in-between color selected, so while I have this in-between color selected and I'm happy with how this cloud is looking, I'm going to add some dots. Now these are kind of like the bubbles coming out of the cauldron. It's my untitled brush. I still haven't thought of a name. If you think of a good name for it, put it in the comments down below. But I'm just going to be adding dots right above this cloudy area that we have. I'm going to add that in-between color. I'm grabbing this green, going over the whole thing as well, and then I'll grab that purple as well, just to give it more a dynamic look, to make it look like these bubbles are kind of coming up out of the cauldron. Now you can do bubbles overflowing the cauldron if you want. This is just the way that I did it with this. Now let's go ahead and do the floor area here. I'm going to grab that square brush, and on a new layer I'm just going to add in this color here, and then we'll add a little bit of color variation before we start adding in the objects. And then we're going to alpha lock that layer so that when we add these details, it won't go outside the lines there. And then we're going to grab an orangish color, and then we'll add a little bit of that light orange yellow color here as well. So I'm just going to use the square blend brush for this and start adding in these colors here, blending it out similar to how we did the background, similar to how we did the smoky cloud area. I'm just going to blend these colors out until it looks how I want it to look. Now, keep in mind, we will also add a shadow underneath the cauldron, so you don't have to go too crazy with this. You can even not do the lighter color. I decided on the shadow a little bit later because I was just kind of building up the scene. So if you want to just skip this section and just add a little bit of color variation, you definitely can. But I am going to add this here, and then we'll continue on adding in objects. Now I'm happy with how this is looking. I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to add the cauldron in. With the cauldron, I'm just going to do one color for now, and then we'll go in at the end and add details. So I'm going to use this dark red color. I'm going to use that circle brush, and then I'm going to trace and fill in the shape of this cauldron. I'm going to do all the detail work on that same layer. So we have these handles here, we have the top of the cauldron, we have the legs as well. I'm going to do all of the color variation on that same layer. If you want to separate the legs and the handles out onto separate layers, you can definitely do that, but they're not that large and there's not that many details on this cauldron, so it's just as easy to keep it all on the same layer. But feel free, if you want to do them on separate layers, you can definitely do that and then set them to alpha lock, add the fine-tuned details, things like that, highlight, shadows to these sections. You can do that. It is sometimes easier to do it that way, but don't feel like you need to if you want to just do it all on the same layer. And once you have that filled in, we're going to work on the books to the right. Now, sometimes I will color block and add details towards the end, which I did here with the cauldron. I just color blocked it for now. But with the books and the bottles and everything else, I'm just going to work on adding the details because there's not that many objects in this scene. I'm just going to work on the details as we go. So I'm grabbing a brown color. You can make these books any color you want. And I'm also doing this all on the same layer as well. So if you want to do them on separate layers to make it a little bit easier when you add in shadows, you can definitely do that. I'm just going to do it all on the same layer and then tweak it as I go if I need to. But I'm just going to pick different colors for the books here. And then I'm going to grab a lighter yellowish orange color for the pages of the book. I'll use some browns to distinguish the different pages and a couple lighter colors as well. So I'll show you what I do here in just a second. So I ended up actually grabbing that orange color for the pages here. I'm just going to block in all of the pages. Again, this is all on the same layer. I didn't separate out the books or even the pages. I'm just doing it all on the same layer and then we'll modify and tweak it as I go. But I'm just going to trace and fill this shape in. Then I'm going to turn the outline layer off, make sure my books are looking how I want them. If there's anything I need to tweak, then we will set the books to alpha lock and start adding in details. Now to add the details to the pages here, we're going to grab that light yellow orange color and use the circle blend. This is the key to this. Use that circle blend brush and just very lightly go across the surface of the pages here. Now you want it to look like pages, so you'll want to go horizontally across those books like I'm doing. It looks vertical because the way I have the camera rotated, but you want to go horizontal how the pages are going to go, and that's going to give it that look of individual pages. And then you're just going to keep going back and forth over that color. Then I also grab a slightly darker color and I also bring the brush size down so that I can do the individual pages. That's what I'm doing here. I turn that brush size down a little bit. I'm just very lightly dragging my pencil across the screen here, and it's just picking up a little bit of that dark brown color, but it's blending it in so it looks like pages. And now I'm going to grab darker colors of the books that we added here, and I'm just going to add them shadows. So I'm adding shadow to the tops of the two lower books because there's a book on top of it, so we want to darken it a little bit. And then for the brown book on top there, or whatever color you decide to pick, I'm going to go on the bottom to have a little bit of that shadow from up underneath. So that's what I'm just going to do here. Again, I did all these on the same layer, so I'm just being mindful of the edge here with the books and the pages. If you wanted to do these on separate layers, you could definitely do that. But again, they're not very detailed books. The objects aren't very detailed, so I'm just doing everything on the same layer as I'm working on these objects. And because we did this all on the same layer, there's going to be a little bit of touch up that we need to do. And if you did have to do touch up, that's fantastic. But I had a little bit I had to touch up, so I'm just going to go and do that. Now I know I mentioned I did most of the object details on the same layer, but for the bottles, I'm actually going to do them on a couple different layers. I want the bottles not to overlap, so when I do the detail, I can really play around with the look of the bottles. But first, I'm going to actually add the corks to the bottles here. So I'm going to add that in. I'm just grabbing one of those orangey brown colors and just adding in the corks to the tops of the bottles here. And I did actually do these on the same layer as the books. You can do these on separate layer if you want to. It doesn't really matter because there's no overlap between these. Now, still on that same layer, we just did the cork and the books. I'm going to add this red liquid to the bottle here in the front, but then for the bottles in the back, I'm going to put them on a separate layer because they won't overlap. It's okay if we add details to those, but I'm going to put them on the layer below so that they're not overlapping with that red liquid. And feel free to pick any colors you want for these liquids. I'm doing a red, a limey, yellowy green, and then this kind of teal green here on the left. These are all in that color palette, so if you want to use those, they're listed there, but if you want to do different colors, you can definitely pull different colors into these. And now I'm going to tackle the glass. And if you've seen some of my videos before, you know kind of how I do this, but I'm going to grab a light, that light grayish yellow color, the circle blend brush from my brush set, and then on a new layer, I didn't do on a new layer here, but don't do what I did. Add a new layer above all of the liquids we added. And on the new layer, we're just going to use that circle brush to very lightly trace the shape of the bottle here. And then we're going to set that to alpha lock and add some color variation. So the easiest way to do that is just, like I said, use that circle blend brush. It gives you the little bit of broken spaces, kind of like glass. When you see glass, you can see the edge, but sometimes it's just translucent and you don't see it. That's what we're doing here. And so I'm doing the two bottles in the back on separate layers because again they're not overlapping, so they can be on the same layer, and then that bottle in the front is going to be on its own layer. So I'm just adding in, like I said, the outline with this white color and that circle blend brush, adding in some highlights already, and then we will set these to alpha lock and add in some color variation. And I'm pulling in colors that are in the jars. So for this red one, I'm going to pull in some lighter red colors, some darker red colors. I'm just messing around with it to see where I want there to be brighter spots, darker spots. Originally, I went a little bit lighter because I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to be very bright or if I wanted to kind of be dimmed. I end up going a little bit more darker with the outlines around the bottles. So feel free to play around with this as you want, but I want to go a little bit darker with the bottles than brighter. But if you want to go brighter, you can do brighter. I just kind of messing around with it. And you could pull in a bunch of different shades. You could pull in more white. You could pull in the other colors that are surrounding. So some of that teal blue color, that yellow green color, you could pull those as like the reflection from the other bottles if you want to. But feel free to play around with the coloring here on this bottle. The more colors you add, the more sometimes it looks realistic, but I'm just sticking to the colors that are in the bottle, so I'm not making it overly complex. I'm just doing a little bit of color variation, but if you want to see kind of how I tackle some of the other glass objects, I have other videos that I pull in more colors for. And then I'm going to grab that white again and just go over a few spots. I want to brighten it up a little bit because I went too heavy with the coloring and I still want some of that light. Now I'm happy with how the bottles are looking. I'm going to add a little bit of color variation to the corks as well. So make sure you go into that layer, click Alpha Lock for the cork layer, and then grab a lighter orange color. I'm going to go light on the right side of the corks, and then grab a darker color on the left side. So that brown color that I have, and then I'll go back with the original color to blend these two together. And I am using that circle blend brush for this. Now let's go ahead and add a new layer. You could do it above the cauldron layer, just needs to be above the book layer. Grab that circle brush. We're grabbing one of the green colors from the color palette, and we're going to trace and fill in the shape of the frog here, and then we'll add details here in a second. Now let's go ahead and set that frog layer to alpha lock once you have that shape filled in, and we're going to grab some of these other colors in the color palette just to bring in some color variation. So you can grab brown, you can grab a lighter green color. I'm going to start with an orangish color and put that on the underside of the frog here. So where that belly is, I'm going to add a little bit of this lighter orange. I want to brighten it up a little bit with the color variation there. And I put a little bit around the eyes as well, but I'll go over it with some greens, just kind of placing where I want the eye shape to go for the frog. So I know kind of where I'm going to add those colors in. And then I'm going to grab some darker brown here just to blend it out. It's going to be darker as you go further under the belly there because of it being in the shade and not being affected by the light. But we're going to just keep building up colors on this frog. I'm going to add some lighter green highlighted areas around the left side of the frog, on the top of the head as well, because it is going to get some of that light from the cauldron here. And you could do any color you want for this frog. So I went with the green frog, but you can do blue, you could do pink. Have fun with it. Do a different color if you want to, but we're just going to keep building up the color here, adding highlights, darkening areas where maybe it got lifted too much. And we're just going to keep building up the shape. Then we'll add in the eyes, and I'll also do a little bit of a white kind of line on the eye to show that's a little bit of a glossy eye. And then we'll move on to the cauldron and some other finishing touches for this drawing. Now with this dark red color in the color palette, I am going to use that for the mouth. So I want there to be a little bit of a distinction for the mouth here. I'm going to bring that brush size down just a little bit. I don't want it to be too thick, but I want a little bit of that distinction. And I'm going to use that same color for the eyes as well. And sometimes you might need to pull in darker colors that aren't in the color palette, so feel free to do that. Again, you can completely change the color and you don't have to go off of the color palette that I provided. If you want to do a completely different visual, that's absolutely fine. But sometimes I'll just pull in slightly darker colors than what's in the color palette, just depending on as I'm building up the scene, what I need for it. And then like I mentioned earlier, I'm using that dark red for the center of the eyes here, and then I'll grab the lighter white color here and add that reflection there. And I'm just going to do a few final touch-ups here on this frog before we move on to the cauldron, and then we'll add a little bit of glow to this image at the end. And now for the cauldron, I'm going to add in some brown colors for this. You could go more silver toned if you want to. I just happen to want to go more brown, and so I'm going to pull in brown. I'm using that circle blend brush, and I'm going dark from the left side of the cauldron and then lighter towards the right side of the cauldron. So I'm just going to start adding in color here, building up this cauldron, giving it some shape to it, more than just one big gigantic dark blob. And then we will move on to final touches here. And I'm just going to keep building up the colors here, so feel free to pull colors in from the color palette. You can also, as you're blending these colors out, pull those in between colors if you want to blend it out. A little bit further, you can do kind of squiggly patterns on the surface if you want to give it a little bit of this texture. Just have fun with this. We're just going to fill this in. It doesn't need to be overly complex because it's just a round cauldron. There's not a lot of details on it, so have fun with it. Change the color, do different textures, mess around with it if you want, but I'm just gonna keep adding in the colors, like I said, going dark from left to right, adding the colors, and then I'll work on the handles a little bit to give them a little bit of distinction so they're not just blended in. And then we, like I said, we'll do finishing touches here on the image after this. And once I'm done with this handle here on the right side, I'm going to start adding in final details. So we're going to add a shadow underneath of the objects here that are on the ground. And then we will mess around a little bit with adding some different blend mode type things to give a little bit more glow and mystique to the smoke or the bubbles kind of coming out of the cauldron there. So on a new layer right above the ground floor layer, we're going to add that shadow. So I'm going to go more blue tinted for this. I'm going to grab that circle blend brush. I'm going to add some of that blue underneath the glass here, underneath the cauldron and the books. And then I am going to do a Gaussian blur on this just to blend it out a little bit more. And we're going to do it blend mode. So it looks blue right now. It won't look blue when we do the blend mode. But like I mentioned, we're going to be doing a Gaussian blur. I also set to clipping mask because I didn't want that color to go above the floor level here. Because when you add that color in, if you're not doing clipping mask, it will go up behind in that background, and I didn't want that. So now that I have this area here, I have that Gaussian blur done. I'm going to go into layers. I'm going to click that N, and that pulls up our blend mode. I'm going to set to multiply, bring the opacity down, and there's our shadow. Now we are going to add some more highlights to the object. So we're going to create a couple new layers. We'll do one above the frog. We'll do one above the cauldron, above the bottles, because I want to add a little bit more more highlights to this. And so I'm grabbing a yellowish color, light white yellowish color here on those two layers. I'm just going to add in some of this highlight here. And then what we're going to do is set it to clipping mask. So you want it above the layer, you want to set to clipping mask. So for instance, this is above the cauldron. I moved it above the cauldron, I set to clipping mask, and now it won't go outside those lines. Same thing when we work on the frog and these other areas here. You want to set that to clipping mask if you're adding in some highlights. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just doing new layers above all these objects, adding a few highlights here and there, and then we will change the blend modes on these highlights. And I just ended up merging the glass layers together so I can just do one highlight on top of them all. Since we're already adding in the main colors, they don't have to be separated out for this. And so I'm just putting them all in the same layer and just adding a little bit of that highlight. Again, I'm kind of focusing on that light coming from the top of the cauldron where the kind of glow and smoke's coming out of. So if you want to do it that direction, you can as well. That's just what I'm doing here. And now I'm going to add a little bit of kind of this soft brush glow of where the smoke is, because we're going to change that and do a different blend mode. So I'm just going to add it over top of the bubbles that we created and the smoke that we created. Don't worry, it's not going to fully cover it. We'll change the blend mode, but I'm just going to add a little bit here so that we can have fun and do different blend modes for it. And feel free to mess around with the blend modes. You don't have to do the exact ones I do. If you like a different one, go with that one. I am bringing the opacity down a little bit because it's a little too bright and still kind of clouding the background there. So I brought the opacity down, but again, feel free to mess around with the different blend modes. You might not even use the same one for all these objects. I don't always do that. Sometimes I like to do overlay for certain things. Sometimes I like to do linear light. So there's just a bunch of different options that you can pick for the highlights here that are a lot of fun to mess around with. So definitely mess around with it and have fun. And I'm just going through all of these highlighted areas that we went through and just changing the blend mode to ones that I like for them. And with that, our bubbling cauldron is done. Thank you so much for following along with me in this video. I hope you had as much fun as I did. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe this video and drop below what kind of potions would you make in this cauldron. I'll see everyone in the next video.